What's up, guys? We are back Friday night. Actually, not Friday night. It's Thursday night. It feels like a Friday to me because my kids are on spring break. We want to talk bass management. We've got Anthony Grimani, and we have a new guest, Mr. Phil Hendry. How you doing, Phil?
Well, you know, kiss my ass, Gene.
Most people probably don't even know who Phil Hendry is, but he did the best voice parodies on AM radio that I ever heard back in the early 2000s. Love that guy. Glad to have you on our show, Mr. Phil Hendry.
Good to be here.
Awesome. We want to get back to the basics of bass, but before we do that, I just want to let you guys know I got some jewelry here. I've been trying to get these for like a decade. I got some Audio Quest cables with the 72-volt battery. I'm going to be checking it regularly to make sure the bias is still working on it with this little light. And I can't wait to measure these. I'm actually really excited. I'm curious to see how these measure. As you guys know, I like to measure cables, and this is the one I've been waiting for a long time. These are called the Thunderbird Zeros. I don't know, Anthony. Can you fix your acoustics of your room with a cable?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Oh. It costs a lot more. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And equalization along with cables.
Well, aren't cables equalizers?
Well, some are.
The bad ones are, yeah.
Only if you drive a Ferrari.
Let's not go there. All right, so I've done a bunch of videos on bass management already, but the fact is we have different perspectives. Everybody's got different takes. I'm curious to see what you come up with, Anthony. And, just as a preface to everybody has their own take on how to set up systems and how to get the bass right in the system. The end goal is to get good sound in the room. So if I set a crossover at 80 hertz and Anthony likes 70 hertz, it's all a bit depending on everybody's experiences and the kind of systems that you're setting up. That's why I like differences of opinions here. We got Anthony Grimani here. Obviously, he's done, probably hundreds of rooms at least, right? Maybe
2 rooms.
Two rooms total?
Mine and my parents.
Oh, do you live in the basement?
Yeah.
Yeah, he got their boat kind of good.
Yep. So it's going to be cool. I want to turn the presentation over to you because you're Mr. King of PowerPoint and you have all the slides for us, and you're going to go over bass management and getting the bass right in your room.
Getting the bass right. So first off, notice that now we're on to Home Cinema Acoustics 201. 201.
201, yeah.
We did a bunch of streams on, I guess we called it, 101. We've graduated. We're now on to the next level. So some of the stuff I'm talking about here, I've introduced in the last few weeks. Now we're going to graduate it into the next level, and probably the most important thing to worry about when you are getting into room acoustics, once you're above the kind of the surface layer of that onion, is how to get your bass to really kick. I'll use the word ass. It's not a 4-letter word. How to kick ass.
Yep.
Because when it's good and it's really kicking and it's dynamic and it's good and everybody hears it well, it's fun. It's that simple.
And most importantly, everyone hears the same bass in every seat, not just the money seat.
Right, and that's one of the really hard parts. First of all, it's hard to get good bass in the types of room sizes we're addressing here. And then next, it's hard to get it to be right at all the seats. So we're going to spend a bunch of time on that.
Awesome.
So as a little reminder about me, my name is Anthony Grimani. I run 3 companies now. Grimani Systems is a speaker company that makes some interesting, novel, new stuff that you guys should go look at. PMI Engineering is a company I started now 22 years ago that does engineering and design of listening rooms, recording studios, home cinemas, and stuff like that. And Sonatus Acoustics is a company that sells a whole variety of acoustical treatments for control of the acoustics. We've been talking about reflections, diffusion, all that stuff. So those are the 3 things that keep me busy. I have a degree in BS in EE, so that means I
thought you had a degree in just in bullshitting.
Yeah, I know.
I got one of those.
Yeah, I know how to BS my way around electrical engineering really well. No, I originally studied electrical engineering, which has nothing to do with acoustics. But along the way of designing really good, well-engineered electronics, I realized, well, we got to worry about the acoustics a whole lot more than the finer points of electronics, because that has a lot more influence on the sound quality, once you get above a certain point of quality. So I was lucky enough to spend 5 years at Dolby right out of college. Then I spent 10 years at Lucasfilm THX right after Dolby. And then 22 years ago, I left the comfort of corporate living to just take on my freedom, be my own boss, which means, like most of us over here, work really long hours, but having a good time doing that, because I'm lucky enough to work in a field that is most people's hobby. It was my hobby. It still is my hobby. And I love it and enjoy it. I'm a CEDIA fellow. I've made top instructor of CEDIA. I'm an AS member. I have multiple patents. 2 kids. I was going to say multiple kids, just 2 kids. I play guitar and saxophone. I fly an airplane. I have an old funky car, 1937 Morris 8. I have lots of bicycles and too many other toys. And that's what I do when I'm not talking about this stuff.
Cool about the airplane. I didn't know you flew airplanes.
Yeah. That's how I get around, especially in the pandemic. I just, I'm a little leery about getting into planes just mainly because of the airport transit. And so I just go places in my old Cherokee. It's 50 years old, but it still flies. It's not as old as me, but it flies. So
nice.
Anyway, so the reason we're here to talk about acoustics is the big warning that room acoustics will mess you up. You have the best cables in the world with 72-volt bias, and you have great speakers and great amps and great everything. And that only, depending on who you talk to, that only accounts for between 20 and 50% of what your enjoyment and nirvana is going to be in the end. The other 50 to 70% is what happens in the room when the sound leaves the speakers and bounces around. This is just a summary of what we've been talking about. And ultimately, what we want out of a properly engineered and constructed acoustical system is to get a good quality direct sound from the speaker and then have the room return some energy out of us that's clear, it's immersive, it doesn't have any funny accidents, and it just supports the speaker. So that's what we keep talking about, is that the room should act as a neutral supporter of your speakers rather than just mess them up. So, and in that, we've talked about the issues of reflection decay time. The global part of what the acoustics do is there's, reflections in all directions, and a room that works right acoustically has the right number of reflections, and their time and spectrum, the balance of our frequencies is all just right. So that's a 20-second summary of hours and hours of me babbling on.
Yep.
So,
and we have a playlist on room acoustics with all of the stuff that we've went over in the past. Go to the playlist section of YouTube Audioholics playlist, and you'll find all those great videos.
Cool. Great. Now I know where I can go to watch that. Give me a quick second. I'm going to just shut off my phone so that whoever's calling goes away. There we go. All right, cool.
And guys, don't forget about our Patreon, because we put all these PowerPoints over on our Patreon, patreon.com/audioholics.
Yeah. So a quick summary of what we talked about before is if you take a room and you apply about 15%, if you look at the surfaces, walls, ceiling, around you and above you, and you cover about 15% of that surface with absorptive materials evenly distributed to the room, and you apply another about 15% of scattering devices, also known as diffusers, interleaved with the absorbers around the room, you're already way ahead of the curve in terms of how you make the room work with your speakers. And this is, I'm just going to flip through these. This is a suggested layout for all of this stuff. There's other ways to do it, but this is a good recipe that will make the room work well, given a rectangular room with typical conditions. Now, within that, we do have to worry about low frequency absorption. A lot of people just do treatments at mid and high frequency, and you really have to control the waves all the way down, because we want both the reflection decay time, so how sound reflects around the room, to be even at all frequencies, from 10 kilohertz to 5 kilohertz to 1 kilohertz, all the way down to at least 200 hertz for good sound quality. And also, the rooms we work in have what's called standing waves, which I'll spend a whole bunch of time on today to explain exactly how they construct. It's kind of a mystery to some people, but they're standing waves that affect the bass, that make it sound really loud at some places, really quiet at other places, make it sound like there's no dynamics, or that the bass hangs forever, like it could just stay in the room for a second and a half after a kick drum hits. And that's usually between 30 hertz and 200 hertz. And that's physically a different effect than just the reflection decay time. So we are going to talk all about that today, and probably next week, because there's enough here to go over for hours. By the way, what I'm showing you here is a slightly simplified version of one of the master classes I teach at CEDIA and ISE in Europe. So CEDIA is in the US, ISE is in Europe. It takes 3 hours to get through this in a focused and intense way. So there's no way I can cover all that today, but I've dumbed it down a little bit. I've covered some stuff in earlier events, earlier webinars. We'll see what we can get through. So bass matters. So we're
up to 30% of the experience, right?
Exactly. So how you quantified that, of course, is a little difficult, but studies in psychoacoustics, like how people like sound, have shown that 30 to 40% of what people go, that sounds good, has to do with the 20 hertz to about 100 hertz region, which is, just one small portion of the bandwidth. But that's sort of, think of that as the foundation of the sound you're hearing for music and film. It just, if the bass rocks, everything else is going to be good. If the bass is sucky and is missing energy or is lacking in dynamics, you're just not going to end up with good sound quality. Just and what I mean by sound quality, without getting even too specific, what I mean is just a sense. It's like, oh man, that's just enjoyable. That's just, I feel like I'm enveloped in this. I feel like I'm enjoying this. I actually just did a demo for a potential client yesterday. Just the guy had very little time, so I just played 2 or 3 little cuts of music, one demo, and after about 3 minutes of it, it's like, okay, I know you got to go. I'll let you go. He's like, man, in like a few seconds, I was completely transported in that movie. I've never experienced that. That's amazing. It's like, that's our purpose. Our purpose in making movies and displaying them correctly is essentially grab you and transport you into the screen and make you be somewhere totally different within seconds. And it's great. It's like a complete escape. You've traveled somewhere completely different while being in the safety of your own home. That's what we want. And part of the thing it takes to get there is to have good low frequency. So low frequencies are important. And being on the right screen is also important. So let's go.
I mean, I tend to focus on the accuracy of the bass. Maybe I'm biased from doing this for almost 30 years, but I really kind of focus on how realistic and how accurate is the bass, not just how loud it is. Yeah,
loud is easy. Just put bigger subwoofers, but it doesn't mean it's accurate. I've been in rooms that have really loud bass, but it's so resonant that the bass just sounds like there's like no definition.
So one thing I want you to address when we get to it is, if you look online, when people when they set up 2 subs in their systems, 90% of the pictures I see online is they put 1 sub on each side of the center channel, and they're like, I got multi-sub. No, you really have 1 large sub co-located because they're too close together to actually be manipulating the room modes correctly. So that's something I think is worth addressing, because it looks cool to put your subs up front, but that's not always the best location to get even bass in your room.
Right. To be fair, those 2 subwoofers on either side of the center speaker are better than 1 subwoofer in the corner.
For sure,
If some of the problems, we're gonna cover this. I'm so happy you bring that up. If some of the problems are standing waves that people call modes, I'm going to use the word standing wave. The fact that it has a modal progression mathematically that's like an adjective, if you want. If you have standing waves from left to right, strong standing waves between the left and right side of the room, and you put a pair of subwoofers on either side of the center, spaced apart, you could actually reduce the efficiency of that standing wave, which means it's not as audible. Or if the standing wave is between the front and back of the room, you put both of them in the front wall, and they end done nothing to that standing wave. So
quickly, we got a super chat here from Awesomeness Caleb. Grimani Alpha loudspeaker review and measurements from James Larson when? Well, that's going to be something we have to take up with James. I don't think he's here tonight, but that is something that we do want to do, possibly over the summer or early before CEDIA time.
And I would love that anytime. That would be fantastic. Of course, that doesn't have to do with bass, but it does have to do with whatever. We think we make interesting speakers. How's that?
Sure.
So in the way to produce good bass, there's a lot of legends. There's a lot of, if you do this, that would happen. And like a lot of those have been debunked, or people still believe them. I still argue with people who say, no. The subwoofers need to be in the front of the room, and their wave needs to hit you together with the front speakers. And that's the only way to do it. It's like, well, anechoically, if you're outdoors or if you're in a room that's 200 feet long, you're right. But when you're in a room that's 20 feet long, you're wrong. That's not how the bass constructs in a room. And I'm going to show you diagrams about that. So many legends, we got to get around them. So the bottom line is that small rooms, And I don't mean by small rooms a 10 by 12 room. I mean any room that's smaller than about 50 feet long, which is, I would say, 99% of the audience here. They have standing waves, and standing wave resonances cause all kinds of I'm going to call it, I was going to say havoc, but it really is more
Havoc,
like, sorry?
Havoc.
Well, no, it's actually, it's more like chaos. It's like really hard to control. You know, you can try to keep it all under control, but one thing affects another thing that affects another thing that affects another thing. And in the end, you can end up with headroom issues. So let's pretend, I'm going to explain this, but let's pretend that because of standing wave issues, you have a hole that's 20 dB down at 60 hertz. There's a lot of rooms that do that, but let's pretend that. So you have a hole that's down 20 dB. 20 dB meaning that it's going to take 10 times more power to like overcome it. So you could try to equalize that by putting a bump there. Now there's no headroom in your subwoofer. It can't play it. So equalization is not the only solution. It's one of the solutions. And I'm going to talk about the fact that the right way to solve all of these issues in low frequency is a 5-step process. So,
in addition to that, if you EQ'd that one bump or that one null out, if you don't have good seat to seat consistency, you just made another seat worse. You just bumped the bass that might not have that dip, and you're gonna have too much bass in those frequencies. Right.
So you really need to look at the whole room, and equalization is extremely important, but on its own doesn't solve everything. So
Correct.
There's a bunch of solutions, but they're often ignored. And so we all still see a lot of theaters, built and developed by lots of well-known integrators, well-known people out there that have one big subwoofer in the front. And, if you're lucky, that works. If it actually does work, you should go get yourself a lottery ticket, because it's very unusual that it will work. So overview of what I'm going to cover. I'm going to give you some background and data to actually show some examples of what rooms can do. We're going to talk about room dimensions and how they affect the bass. We're going to talk about bass damping, which is generally a combination of absorption and walls that create absorption. We're going to talk about seating locations and how you can move your seats around and go from really sucky bass to pretty good bass. We're going to talk about how to select subwoofers and speakers and where to place them so that the bass is the best possible. And we're going to talk about crossover settings. So I'm glad Gene brought that up. There's certain rules of thumb of crossover, but if you really want to go to the next level of that onion, peeling back layers and get better and better, you really should spend some time deciding if the right crossover is 70 or 60 or 80 or 90. And that's actually a pretty complicated set of decision points.
Also the slopes, depending on how they integrate with the speakers.
The slopes will completely change all of that. It gets complicated. And if you just know what to look for, it's just like cooking. If you know the recipe, you can actually turn something out that's good. Now, at the end of all of that, if you worry about all of these things and tune the room correctly and do some listening to make sure that not just your measurement instruments or the legends or the rules work, but you actually go, hey, am I confirming that? Then you end up with good bass. So let's jump into the first background and data. So this is first bass. You mentioned something like 30% of people or 30% of the sound quality you think of is representative, like this is enjoyable. It comes from bass. And I actually found this picture of a person that has a bass clef tattooed on their arm. And, maybe we should all go do that. What do you think?
I'm in. I'm down.
I'm in. So just take that, bring that to your local tattoo parlor and have that may as well put it on both your arms. What the hell? Now, so bass, audiences love it. Kids love it. The neighbors love it. Buyers love it. It's tactile. When bass is really good, you don't just feel it, but you don't just hear it, but you actually feel it. And that's when people start to really smile, when they actually go from just hearing sound to like, man, I felt like my chest was moving and my pant legs were moving. That's like super cool. But it's hard to do. That's why we're here today, to talk about this for a while. So in order to get it to work, you can't just throw a subwoofer in there or put some big speakers and hope it's going to work, because I guarantee it probably on its own won't work. You got to manage it. So in looking at bass matters, we do care about what's the bass extension of your system, as in how low does it go? Can it really play down to 20 hertz? Does it stop at 30 hertz? Does it stop at 40 hertz? I see people buy these little subwoofers that are cute. They put in the corner of the room, and they're said to be good subwoofers. Well, out of a small driver and a small box, you're not going to get much below 50 hertz, and that may thump enough for you, but it may not be accurate. The other thing we care about is the bass balance. So some people crank the bass up like crazy, and all you hear in the movie is just that's not right. There's the correct balance so that it sounds like what the director intended. And the next thing, and what we care about, is bass quality, which is are all the tones playing back equally? Is there a good resolution across the whole range of bass? And is the bass also, in terms of its quality, is it also tight and not boomy? What I call
so quick thing I wanted to tell you, Anthony, if you don't mind me interrupting.
Yep.
Years ago, before I had measurement tools, I'm talking back in the late 90s, early 2000s. You know how I set up the bass in my system?
No, tell me.
The Avia disc. You remember it had the warble tones?
I had
using an SPL meter.
I use that all the time.
Did you use the SPL meter and you watched the thing fluttering? And
totally remember that.
We've come a long way, my friends.
We have come a long way, baby. That's for sure.
I still have one of those discs in my, my little pack of calibration stuff.
But you know who doesn't really like bass is wives.
Oh yeah, it's true.
Most wives.
So to an extent, I think the women do appreciate good quality bass. They don't like it too loud. The auditory system of men and women is pretty different, and there's a sensitivity and an energy in bass that's sort of overwhelming for some people. And so if it's boomy, if it's loud, if you want if you are a man and you want your female partner to be there with you, you're gonna have to manage it and not make it too loud, not make it ugly.
Gotta get that smooth
and make sure you don't do this. One of my early projects when I started the consulting company was and there was an article in Home Theater Magazine or whatever about this, called Mars and Venus in the Home Theater. I remember that's from like 20 years ago. And it was a classic case of standing wave issues. Where the guy sat, there was no bass because there was a hole in the standing wave. Where she sat, there was a peak. And they were always arguing about, it's too loud. I can't stand it. Oh my God, you're an idiot. I hate you. I don't want to be here. They were like literally fighting. And the guy calls me. It's like, I read one of your articles and you come over. And it's like, look, there's all the bass is here, no bass there. So let's fix it. Let's, manage the bass in the ways that I'm going to talk about here. We fixed it.
Just a heads up, Anthony, you keep freezing up. I don't know if Don, are you seeing that too, or is that
I
just
haven't seen him freeze up at all? No.
Okay, then it's on my end. No, sorry about that.
It's really warm here. I'm not sure what. But hey, first day of actually yesterday was the first day of 80 degrees. Welcome to California. It was cool.
Right now, technically.
Yeah. So that was the case. You brought up men, women, and women are more sensitive to
they definitely
bad bass
are.
And bass energy,
Yep.
and also watch out that you're not in a situation in your room where you've got no bass and you keep cranking it up, and she's got all the bass, and she's like, "You're an idiot. I don't want to be here. I'm just going to go read a book next door." And that's not a home theater. That's like your room, and whatever. So.
Yep.
And that's what's it here. We ideally we want all listeners in the room to have similar good bass. So.
One thing I wanted to say, go back to that slide. I just want to clear the air on one thing. You see where it says bass quality, bass transients tight, not boomy. I think some people get they give some subwoofers bad raps. They say a subwoofer's slow or it's boomy. 9 times out of 10, it's not the subwoofer. It's the fact that the subwoofer is not integrated well into the system.
Yeah.
And if they get a sub with a lot of output, like a ported sub has more output at lower frequencies because of the port, they think that the ported subs are slower than sealed subs when that's usually not the case.
Yeah. So the differences in transient response between different subwoofers do exist. Whether you have a direct radiator, 12-inch driver in a box that's the right size, 3 or 4 cubic feet, or you have an 18-inch with a port, or you have a bandpass subwoofer where the driver is actually into a resonator. The differences. There are differences, but the differences are this big, trying to show you that, compared to what the room will do to those transients. So don't worry about that. All subwoofers are playing slow moving, notes that take, 10, 20 milliseconds to develop. Don't worry about it. The room could actually take the bass energy and smear it over a whole second.
Wow.
And therefore, differences between transient responses of different subwoofer technologies are tiny. They do exist, but they're tiny compared to what the room's going to do.
Yep.
So, all right. Now, I want to show you some real data. So there's there's an example of a home cinema, in this case, a 7.1 channel setup with 3 front speakers, 2 sides, 2 backs. And what's going to happen with the bass is there will be boundary conditions. So that's how the subwoofer interacts with individual reflections in the room. There would be issues of headroom. There is issues of where to set the crossover. There's issues of how you localize or don't localize a subwoofer. There's issues of standing waves. Now, first legend is bass is non-directional. You can put the subwoofer anywhere. Is that true? So, if there was a live audience in front of me, I'd go, raise your hand. Have you heard that? Let me show you a test I have done in a listening room of whether that's true or not. So let's start with that. Effects of subwoofer location. So this is a test in which I take one subwoofer and move it to 5 locations in the room. In this case, I actually happened to move it to locations that corresponded to where the left channel would be, the center channel would be, the right channel, the right side speaker or side right, and the side left speaker. So these 5 locations. And why there, why not? One of the why there actually could be that there's people who think, no, I don't want a subwoofer, I'm just going to use full range speakers. And a full range speaker could just be thought of as a satellite speaker with a subwoofer underneath it. And so I want to show you what happens to the 20 hertz to 200 hertz region as you put that here or here or here or there and see how it interacts with the room. And you're
keeping the measurement location fixed the whole time.
The measurement location is always right here at the main seating location. Right. Absolutely. And you can do it the other way around, which is you can leave a subwoofer at one place and move the mic around. And I don't have time to go into that. If we have time in a future one, I'll show you that. But this is a real test I did. Let's see. So first off, I start with this good subwoofer made by a company located in Portland. Am I allowed to name brands here?
Yeah. Is that Atlantic Tech?
No, it's a Triad. It's a Triad.
Oh,
Gold.
Triad. Okay.
It's a 15-inch aluminum cone. Works superbly well. Wonderful subwoofer, low distortion, great transient response. This particular version, I was actually using their external amplifier. It can come with an internal or external amp.
Great product, by the way. I'm a dealer. They're great.
Unfortunately, on the way to this test, I dropped it, so it got damaged here. Oops. But first off, here's the near field response of this subwoofer from 20 hertz to 20 kilohertz using an impulse response. This is a measurement done outside. You can see from the earlier picture. Drag the subwoofer outside, far from any boundaries, in the middle of a parking lot. The closest building structure is like 50 feet away, and the microphone's right in the cone. And this is this is what the subwoofer puts out in front of it. So very smooth response from 20 hertz up to 200 hertz, plus and minus. Let's just call it half a dB. It's like fits within a 1 dB window. That's a pretty
awesome that's a pretty low mass driver to go out to 500 hertz like that. Low inductance, low mass. That's probably why it has a good transient response too.
Yep. Now, if you totally off topic, if you go up high enough, there's a resonance of that woofer cone. Whatever, it's low pass filter. It doesn't really matter. So that's the subwoofer on its own before you put it in a room. Now let's take that same subwoofer from 20 to 20 hertz. We'll call it stellar. And let's put it at the left location in the room. I could have put it anywhere else, but let's just start there. Let's remeasure the 20 to 20 hertz. Here's a picture of the actual room. This is a room that's 16 by 13 by 9, which you guys that are in the real measurement out there, it says 5 meters by 4 meters by 2.75. Here's a subwoofer in the corner. By the way, you notice I have it on a dolly so I don't break my back.
Yeah, smart.
Thing's a little heavy. There's my microphone. This is a 1/4-inch Earthworks microphone. Good measurement omnidirectional microphone. Yep. We use those for our field work, and we compare them against an equivalent, but much higher quality and much more expensive Brule & Care that never leaves the lab because I don't want to break it. So let's see what that subwoofer placed at that location and measured at the main seat location does. Here it is.
Wow.
That sucks.
Yep.
So from 20 to 20 hertz, the difference between the loudest peak and the lowest dip at that seat location is 38 decibels.
Wow.
40 decibels is a 99 dB 99% attenuation. So when you go down 40 dB, you're left with 1% of what you started. So this level at 52 hertz over here is about 1% of the peak over here at around 38 hertz. So 99% down. It happens to be 38 decibels. Okay. And then it goes back up and down and up and down and up and down. And this stuff over here is boundary conditions. This is the room standing wave response, what it does to the subwoofer. Notice that below that, it kind of looks like the original response of the subwoofer. As a reminder, that was the subwoofer on its own outside. This is the subwoofer in the room. So rule number one, rooms are going to screw up your subwoofer, and they're going to screw it up over a certain range, depending on the size of the room. And below a certain frequency, that's below, you can call it below the main standing wave region of the frequency, below the modal range, whatever it is, the thing is sort of direct field again. And in this particular size room, the big problems here are between 30 hertz and about 80 hertz. That's the big region of screw up. So that's the subwoofer at the left speaker location. Now let's move it over to the center speaker location. So I just moved subwoofer, same microphone. I just go over to the dolly, push it over to right under the screen, remeasure 20 to 20 hertz. And this is the picture of it, just to prove to you that I did it. And this is the response at the center location. So from 20 to 20 hertz, the error is only 28 dB now. Still sucks. Okay. There's a peak at 36 or 37. There's a dip at 52. Anybody know what 52 to 55 hertz typically is by any chance? What is that?
You mean music content wise?
Yeah. There's an instrument that puts out a lot of energy right there.
Kick drums?
Kick drum. Big rock kick drum. 22 inches by 18 inches. Well tuned. Nice kick. Nice done kick drum. It's right there. That thump of the kick drum that you hear when you go to a rock concert, and that you may notice, when you're at home and you're listening to a recording, you never quite get that thing. That's because most rooms have really bad standing wave resonances there. And in the case of this particular room at that seat location, it's a suck out. So the kick drum has no oomph.
No life there, yeah.
No life. All you hear is the kick of the drum.
Anthony, we have a quick super chat. I'm just going to throw this up here. 1-2 Red's asking, is it better to use 2 output sub on the AVR or using one as a splitter? And I'm going to answer that and just say the advantage of having a processor that has multiple sub outs is you have independent delay control, and having independent delay control allows you to adjust for path differences so you can get better integration of the 2 subs. So if you have the ability, it's better to have independent delay as opposed to just daisy chaining 2 subs on one delay setting. Do you agree with that?
Correct. Nice turntable, by the way, on 2 Red.
Oh yeah, that is nice.
So I will qualify what Gene just said. If your processor with its 2 outputs gives you different independent level and delay control, absolutely use the 2 outputs and play with that. And much later, I'll actually show you what that does. It is equally stunning what you can do. You can fix huge problems with that.
Yep.
So what I don't have here, and I should have put it in there, is that same response when you move the seating location back 1 seat. So if you go back about 4 feet, that 52 hertz dip, that's over here, goes back in the other direction. So there's a huge peak. And so there's a difference at 52 hertz, the kick drum, of about 30 decibels between 2 seats. One person goes, man, that rock track is really anemic. The other person's like, woohoo! Same room, same subwoofer, everything. So now let's move that same subwoofer to the right location. Okay, same thing. Let's see what happens here. There's a response at the right location. It's not as bad. It's only 20 dB error. That's still bad. Okay, so there's something funny about this. So first, here's the overlay. Blue is my left. Green is the center. Right is the red. By the way, those 3 colors I always use in my work when I've got diagrams and colors of wires. That's because I always think of right as red, because that's how it is in on stereo jack. Right,
connects. Yeah,
that's right. And then I think that we're often using video, which is RGB. So my mnemonic is, okay, R is always right, RGB, G is this, green is the center, blue is the left. That and $5 will maybe buy you a coffee at the local coffee shop. But there's the three results. Now, I do want to point out from this picture. Let me go back. The picture. You can't really tell from this crappy picture, but the room is symmetrical, slightly, right? The location of the left and right are at the same distances from the left and right wall. They're at the same distance from the front and back wall. There's a slight difference between where the left door and the right door is. It's the same framing. It was built by the same, and it's completely different. How's that for a little like kick in the pants about how complicated and chaotic this is, right? So three subwoofer locations that could be the same as 3 full range speakers, right? Imagine you got this big badass speaker with dual 12-inch drivers and 500 watts pushing it, and you sprung for 3 of those across the front, and you say, I'm going to run them full range. You could run with this, where the 3 have completely different bass.
Wow.
All 3 of them are wrong, but they're wrong in a different way. And that is not going to be good sound. You won't get good imaging. You won't get good dynamics. You won't get good complementary bass. You're starting with some trouble there. Okay. Now, just for giggles, let's look at what would happen if we put the subwoofer at the side right and side left locations. You know, basically say, I have some room in the middle of the right wall. Let's see what we get. So there's the response of that same subwoofer at those locations. It's 20 to 20 dB peak to peak errors. And what I mean by that is that here's our lowest dip here, which in the case of this measurement was about 78 dB. The peak is at about 97.
97.
So that's about 20 dB, 19 to 20 dB. That's not good, right? What we're trying to do to get good sound is for everything to land within about 5 or 6 dB peak to peak errors. Plus and minus 3 dB means you're going to get something that's ear candy. This is not good, not acceptable.
So your goal, just to be clear, your goal is plus or minus 5 dB for the entire audio bandwidth, right? The entire bass bandwidth.
No, my goal is plus and minus 2.5 to 3, which is a total window of 6, but not all up against one side or the other. You know, once you get to plus and minus 2.5 or 3, you can academically keep working at it to try to get it even tighter. And most of the listening tests out there go, well, the return on investment is really, really small considering the effort. Mm-hmm. If you have the time, money, and energy, you may as well try to get to plus and minus 2, plus and minus 1.5. Trying to get to plus and minus 1 electroacoustically is...
I mean, that's a really tight goal, especially you're talking about multiple rows of seats or just one row of seats.
Let's just say at the captain's seat. You'll never get there at all the rows of seats. Impossible.
Yeah, I was gonna say, because my target's plus or minus 5 across 2 rows. That's what I shoot for.
That's a good target. So
now, one question I have for you: do you have any measurements in this room where you put a sub in a near field location, like right behind the seat?
Yes. I could go fetch that and find that for you. That would be like right behind the couch.
Yeah, we could do that another time.
It's still all bad because when you're talking about standing waves, the near field, far field, it's all still the same. You still end up with a hole at that location until the subwoofer happens to be at the null of the standing wave. So the fact that it's near field is less important than if you can put it at the null. And several slides down the way, I'm going to show you that.
Awesome.
I kind of hinted to that in an earlier presentation, but moving the subwoofer around can get you to a place. If you have a single subwoofer, you can get to a place where it doesn't suck as badly. Murphy's law says that place is going to be right in front of a door or right in front of a place where you don't want it, but you can get there. So
is your end goal when you're setting up a theater for somebody? Do you really? I know we try to get seat to seat consistency as good as we can, but in the end of the day, you're really tightening up the calibration at one money seat, even though you're getting all the other seats good. You're really trying.
No, that's not my end goal.
Okay.
So let me actually break this into 2 categories: dedicated listening room where you are allowed to move speakers anywhere you want to.
Right.
Okay? And in which you know that there's only 1 or 2 listening seats because it's a dedicated 2-channel listening room. There, my methodology is go to the room and plan on moving subwoofers around, try this, try that, spend a bunch of time trying what I call positional equalization. Mm-hmm. That's one path. And there, try to get at the main seating locations, try to get it to plus and minus 3 dB and make sure that at other locations where somebody could sit, it doesn't suck. So that's one mode. Totally different mode is dedicated home cinema that's got decorative characteristics to it, where you're doing the design on paper and the rule is set by the architect, the designer, or the client that it's all going to get hidden. And sorry, you won't be able to put subwoofers where you want to. They all have to be at a location during construction, you're not changing it.
That's the story of Don's life, man.
That's
he's always in that position.
No. Professionally, I mean,
yeah,
location and placement of subwoofers in these high-end homes where it's aesthetics are king is very difficult sometimes. I mean, we have to do in-ceiling subwoofers, we have to do behind-screen subwoofers, and wall subwoofers. So that's a big deal.
Right. And by the way, there's nothing wrong with saying, I don't want to see them. You've got to decide where they are now. You're the engineer. You know, they design rockets and they mostly fly. You should be able to do that. And you can, if you apply some of the rules. If you follow my webinar and send $55 to my secret Swiss bank account, I will teach you how to do that. Now there's a bunch of rules using physics. Maybe I should open a secret bank account. There's basic rules and guidelines where if you follow this recipe and you have these tools and you take the time, you can get to a point where the bass is really good. And I'm going to show you at the end, all the way at the end, I'm going to show you a bunch of examples of that, where 4 subwoofers are placed in a room and they're a lot better than just one subwoofer, just to start with. And then you tune them with all of the methods we're going to discuss. And you can get to a point where even though it was all done in theory and it's all hidden and it's all, you know, the way an architect, a designer, or I would want if I want a pretty room, you can get really good bass. Mm-hmm. So first off is, do we agree we have a problem? When I show you these charts that show errors of 38 dB, 20 dB, they change from seat to seat, or I didn't show you that, but they change from location to location. We agree we have a problem, yeah?
That's the first step. For
step.
Bassaholics Anonymous.
But guess what? My solution is going to be only 5 steps, not all 12. Actually, six-part process. Sorry, gotcha. I've added one more thing. So just like in any self-improvement process, you got to first admit that there's a problem, then you go through your steps. And good thing is that here it's only 6. So first off, let's understand what's actually going on in these rooms in terms of the standing waves and the modal character and the reflections and all of that. So that is all about how room dimensions affect what you're hearing and what the standing waves are and what's going on when you put one of these bass radiators in a room. So standing wave resonances and room dimensions. So first of all, how would happen? So here's a totally stylized room. There's no doors, there's no windows. There's our listener, you know, like us with a receding hairline sitting at the seating location. There's a speaker in there, and it happens to be launching a wave in the room that I'm just showing this way that's kind of wiggling from left to right, but this represents no change of pressure compared to original atmospheric pressure. And then it's the woofer's pushing, and then it's back to 0. Now it's pulling. So this is actually just showing a wave filling the whole room. It actually won't be like this. There's a region of high pressure and a region of low pressure. And if we have time later, I'll show you kind of what that looks like. But standing waves happen when the actual wavelength can fit entirely within a room. That is a place where the signal's happy to get louder. It's resonating. It's just like when you strum a guitar, all the strings are going to ring at the frequencies that correspond to the length of the string. Now, it doesn't only happen there. It also happens when the room is half the length of half the size of a wavelength, as in the wave is twice as long as the room. It also happens when you can fit 1.5 waves in the room, or 2, 2.5, 3. Above 3, the effects in most of the rooms we're working in are less problematic. And so this is often referred to as the first resonance, second order resonance, third, fourth, and fifth. Above that, other things happen. We don't have to really worry about it. So those standing waves cause resonances, which lead to uneven frequency response, which means some notes are louder than others, which also leads to poor bass impact because some notes hang in the room a long time. Other ones are absent. So, you know, rather than feel like, wow, I'm really there in the scene, it's like, I'm sort of missing the impact. And they also lead to different bass at every seat. And we're going to keep talking about this. It's not just about one location. In a home cinema, you could have 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 20 seats. Everybody should get good bass. So typical problems we're worrying about in the home theater business is between 30 hertz and 150 hertz. In smaller rooms, it's 150 hertz. In bigger rooms, it's only 80 or 90 hertz. In really big rooms, by 60 hertz, it's all gone. And those numbers you got to kind of keep those in mind when you're deciding where to put your crossover. So let's look a little bit more at some like simple little diagrams to explain how you get buildups of pressure or sound level at one place or another. First of all, let's pretend we have a room. Whoops, let me go over here, in which we have a subwoofer. Let's say this is the front of the room. That's the back of a room. And let's say this room is actually open all the way in the back. You have one of these giant foldable big glass doors because you're living in Hawaii or somewhere warm, and you can open the whole back of the room to the patio. And you project bass into this room, and the wave goes out. If the wave happened to be a first resonance frequency, which is that the wave is twice as long as the room, but you open the whole back wall, there's no reflection, there's no resonance. Okay. If you close those windows in the back, let's say you have a heavy duty storm rated sliding window scheme, that energy that would normally have gone out and continued out the back bounces back. And it just basically, it's the equivalent of it folding back on itself. That in itself is not a problem. But the issue is that what I've shown here is just one instant in time where the bass has propagated out and it's radiating. Really, sound is energy in which the pressure changes at all the time. So if you're by the front wall and you're a subwoofer, you're actually changing the pressure of sound all the time. The woofer's pushing air, and then it's coming back to its rest, and it's pulling air. So if this is the rest position, if that's atmospheric pressure, there's a region when the woofer is pushing out that you're pressurizing the air, then it comes back out. So it goes up and down. And as that launches the waves into the room, you get this funny thing, which is there's these overlaps. The thing goes and comes back, goes and comes back, goes and comes back. And over here, you have sound because there's a change of pressure over time. Over here, you have sound because there's a change of pressure over time. But over here, that's all the same. It never changes.
Mm-hmm.
So over time, you have a null here because as opposed to having the energy going up and the air pressure going up and down that pushes your eardrums in, then pulls them back out, pushes your eardrums in, pulls them back out, and fires energy to your brain every time. Actually, only fires it on the way out. You have a condition over here where over time, there's no change of pressure. That means there's no sound. That's a standing wave in resonance and a null of the resonance at a frequency that happens to be twice as long as the room. If you put a slightly different frequency, so same room, but a frequency that's a little bit shorter, which means a slightly higher, and you look at that same condition, the wave is longer than the room. If there's no door, it propagates outside. But when you close the door, look at what happens. That return, if you can imagine just folding that thing back on itself. Actually, I need my hands here. I'm going Italian on you.
Oh, sorry.
So when this wave without a door would have continued on, you close the door, it now folds back on itself. You get a change of pressure over time over here. You'll get a change of pressure over time, but also everywhere. And sometimes I wish I would actually redo that drawing showing how it changes over time. But you can see right here that that's not overlapping at that same location. It's a different place. So when the frequency doesn't correspond to the length of the room in either twice as long, the same length, 1.5 times, etc., you don't end up with a standing wave. You don't end up with a resonance. You don't end up with these variations of sound level at different seats. So now what I've shown you is actually wave pressures. That doesn't tell you what the sound is. Let me show you a series of diagrams that shows what the resulting measurable or a listenable sound level is. So let's start back up to what's called a first harmonic, which is a wave that's as long as the room. So, so that you understand, actually, if the room is about 20 feet long, which is 6 meters long, this wave would be 25 hertz. Okay. If you play that in this room, this thing with the door closed, with the wall closed, that thing's going to wrap around itself. There's going to be a null here. That null corresponds to that place where there's that butterfly because there's no change of pressure over time. So it's going to be loud at the front, it's going to be loud at the back, and it's going to be dead in the middle. So right down the middle of the room, there's going to be no sound. Now, the reality in most US construction that's typically gypsum board on studs at 25 hertz, that tends to flex a little bit, so it won't return the sound very much. And also the modal character of the room is not going to be that strong. But this is what would happen if you had very solid concrete walls, stone.
Infinitely rigid, basically.
So that's the first harmonic. Let's look at the second harmonic, which is the one in which the full wave fits in the room. At that point, you're going to get a null at 1/4, a peak at 2/4, which also happens to be a half, and then a null at 3/4, and then a peak over there. So when you have a 6-meter long room, 20 feet, and you play 50 hertz, it's going to be loud at the front, it's going to be loud in the middle, loud at the back, and at 1/4 of the room and 3/4 of the room, there'll be a null of sound. Not a good place to sit. It's okay to sit here at 1/3 or 1/3 or 2/3 of the room, you'll be okay. But at 1/4 and 3/4, not good. If we look at the third harmonic, which is where 1.5 waves actually fits in the room, we end up with a null at 1/6, a peak at 2/6, that happens to be 1/3, a null at 3/6, which is also 1/2. Sorry that somehow my computer is not resolving the size of that font. But anyway, that's 1/2. So that's 3/6. That's 3/6, 4/6, which is 2/3, a null here at 5/6, and a peak over there. So depending on where you sit at these different frequencies, you'll end up hearing sound or no sound. And then finally, when we get to the fourth harmonic, which again, if this was a 20-foot room, relatively common, 6-meter room, this is 25 hertz, that's 50 hertz, that's 75, which is 3 times the first one, and that's 100 hertz. At 100 hertz, you're going to get a null at 1/8, a peak at 2/8, null at 3/8, peak at 4/8, which is 1/2, 5/8, 6/8, 7/8, and then a peak. Okay, those are the 4 typical conditions we got to worry about.
So it's important to know that you're talking about rectangular or square rooms. One of the users, we have a super chat here that says, "Well, what do you do with an L-shaped room? It's hard to model an L-shaped room that has no symmetry in the sidewalls." That's at that point. That's when we.
Yep. It's really hard to model. And about 10, 15 years ago, I spent a whole bunch of time doing math and measurements on that. The measurements were actually done with a scaled model. Actually built this like series of different mini L-shaped rooms, energized them, of course, with a much higher frequency, and measured with little small microphones inside those spaces to look at what happens. And what happens is at the corner, rather than get these even lines, to be clear, if this is the length of the room, this is front and this is back, this null is along the whole width of the room. That null is along the whole width of the room, width of the room. You do L-shape and the null actually bends. You do a fan-shaped room and the nulls actually bend that way. You do different shapes and there are nulls. They don't go away. That's a big, huge legend that I'm going to dispel, is that non-rectangular rooms don't have standing waves. That's a big, big lie. What they have is they have standing waves that are not all along a line one way or the other, but they're still there. They're just unpredictable and they bend this way and that way.
Harder to predict.
Right. They're hard to predict. They don't go away. If that was the case, all instruments would be square. And how many times have you seen a square guitar other than Bo Diddley's? They're usually interesting convoluted shapes that they actually resonate over a range of frequencies, but they still resonate. So interestingly enough, if you want to read more about this, in the latest edition of the F. Alton Everest book on acoustics, there is some math on this. There is some work to show that dispersion of the standing waves. And one day when I have time and I'm not designing and installing theaters, I'll actually publish our research. It was really interesting. I've gone over it in the 400 level courses at CEDIA, but we don't have time here. Great question. Thank you very much. Okay. So what do we do with all this? Check this out. If we have a room that is 20 feet long and we put a subwoofer or a speaker at the front of the room and you play it, there is going to be a null here at 1/4 and a null there at 1/4, right around 50 hertz. Remember those diagrams I showed you of our room? Well, there was a null at 50 hertz. It was a little higher because the room's a little smaller. And interestingly enough, if you put your listener over here, they're not going to be happy. They're going to be like, man, I don't know, you just sold me this huge subwoofer, but I don't really feel that thump, thump, thump that I was expecting. But another interesting thing that happens, and I'm going to ask you to put this in your mind, is at that null, the wave energy actually acts as like a seesaw. So right at the standing wave frequency, when the air pressure is positive, on the other side of that null, it's actually negative. So the air actually is going like this. And So what? Well, how do you know that you have a standing wave? One really cool way to do is you get up, you turn your head that way, and you listen right at the null. And if you've ever heard two speakers out of phase from each other, where you get that sort of funny head cold kind of thing, where you feel like, oh yeah, there's a null, my speakers are out of polarity. You can do that with a standing wave. So if this listener got up from his chair, turned his head pointing to the left or right wall, and moved his head this way, playing 50 hertz, they would actually hear that null. And like past the null, suddenly the one ear would get really loud at 50 hertz, right in the null, you'd get this funny head cold feeling, then you'd hear the other one. That's how you know you got a standing wave. That's one way to know. Pretty cool. Did you guys know this?
Very good. No.
That and $5 will buy you another coffee tomorrow.
All right. I need all the coffee I can
walk
at this
into the
time.
coffee shop. Okay, hey, when my standing wave, I can move my hand a minute. Can I get a coffee? It's like, no. So more on that. This is a view from a top of a room that would show what I'm doing here is try to get this like as graphically in your brain as possible. So I'm showing you a lot of drawings, a lot of ways to think of this. But this is a view from the top of a room. There's your couch. This is where you happen to have put the listener, 3/4 of the way back. Or this is where the designer said, this is where the couch goes. And you're like, we can't do that. And the designer goes, you got to do that. It's like, that's not going to work very well. I don't care. That's what we're doing. Okay. So in a room like this, you put speakers, subwoofers over here. It's going to be loud here. It's going to be quiet here. And this little diagram that's going darker is supposed to represent that the sound is darker here, that the level is down. Then it's loud, then it's down, then it's loud. Okay. So this business of the pressure polarity, we're going to use to our advantage in a few different solutions. So remember again, in the first harmonic, there's a positive pressure on one side of the room, negative pressure on the other side of the room. And it changes around the null. When you look at the second harmonic, which is twice the frequency, so again, that 50 hertz condition in a 20-foot room, plus, minus, plus. At the third harmonic, we have plus, minus, fourth harmonic, plus, minus, plus, minus, plus, minus. If it is a standing wave, if really the issue in the room, which there was going to be, is a true standing wave resonance, there will be a flip of polarity with every null. And you'll be able to listen to that either left to right, front to back by turning your head around, or top to bottom by tilting your head this way and going up and down. Okay. So I'm building on this. We're an hour into this fine discussion. And I had warned Gene that I got a lot of slides and we're going to break this into two. So I'm going to take this just a little bit further, just to kind of get to a nice natural break point. And I suggest that we reconnect next week. Is that cool?
Yeah, because my batteries are running low on my cable.
Oh man, you've lost your 72 volts.
Yeah, I got to make sure the light lights up.
Yeah, no, that's not good. Now suddenly your standing wave energies just went like crazy. Right?
So Anthony, can I ask you a quick question before we slow this down? What are your thoughts on placement of subwoofers behind a screen, up high on the wall, possibly on the ceiling, various locations of placement? Any thoughts on that?
Dude, I am going to talk about that till we're all blue in the face because this thing here, this piece of knowledge is going to come in really handy. Spoiler alert. If you put a subwoofer here and you put a subwoofer there and they're connected together and they're both trying to push and pull the energy in the room together. Meanwhile, the standing wave wants the bass to go like this and you try to push it and pull it. Guess what your standing wave is going to do?
Disappear.
It's going to go, dude, I'm gone. It's not going to totally go away. But instead of the bass going like this and having a standing wave that's constructing and causing this null and all this resonant energy, you're basically going, I'm clamping you. I'm not letting you happen. So that's the first spoiler alert about why 2 subwoofers is good and 4 is even more better, is if you can put them on either side of a null. So in the first harmonic, it would be really anywhere here and anywhere there. In the second harmonic, it'd be one here and one there. Third harmonic, it'd be one here, or one here, one there. And in the fourth harmonic, it'd be one here, or one here, one there. Then you've contradicted those standing waves. And if you actually look at this long enough, like a riddle, you'll actually find that Todd Welty thing, like we often call it, of 4 subwoofers located in those places, is the magic solution that gets rid of all of them in all directions, except for the top, because they're placed on the floor, which is why I like to put some on the floor and some up high.
Unless you have an
all
odd
it is.
shaped room, then things get a little more complicated.
So
Right.
once you have an odd-shaped room, all of these predictive lines go away,
Yeah.
but you still have standing waves, and you can actually
Yeah.
try to find where they are. And that the reason why I told you, like, you can move your head is you go, oh, look, there's sort of a standing wave over here. I can follow it. You can, mark it with a tape or something. All right. So first thing that standing waves do is that they create these peaks and nulls at different places, in which the energy on one side is different in polarity than the energy on the other side, which, by the way, could mean that the way the energy integrates with your speakers is wrong because they're suddenly out of phase in that region of frequency or out of polarity. Now, the second thing that standing waves do is since they are resonances, and a resonance is a thing that in the time domain lasts a long time, like plucking the string on a guitar. On a really good guitar, if you guys remember in Spinal Tap, the guy was like, "Listen to this guitar. Can you hear the sustain? It just goes and goes and goes." Well, a really good guitar, if there's any guitarists here or in the audience, and if you've actually gotten to a point where you played a really nice, expensive guitar, you go wing, and it rings and rings and rings because it's solid and it's resonating and it's beautiful. Except that in a room, you don't want that.
Right.
You want just the energy of the speakers, the subwoofers, to hit you and just go away. Well, here's a measurement of a real room in which they are standing waves, and in which, at the non-resonant frequencies, this is what's called a waterfall plot, in which you actually measure the sound over time using impulse response measurements. And you show it here. The first slice is 12 milliseconds, which just happened to be the time of flight, 12 feet from the speaker. Then there's another little slice, another slice, all the way out to 800 milliseconds, 0.8 of a second. So in this particular room, the energy is in the room. It was 30 to about 50 hertz. It hangs for about 30 or 40 milliseconds, which is good. And then it decays. If you actually follow the slope, it decays evenly. And then over here, it hangs and it decays evenly. And then up in this region, which happened to be around 52 and 56 hertz, it decays a lot slower. It hangs in the room much longer. Not only is it louder, but it's also lasting longer. This room will be one in which a kit drum just sounds like blah, 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 rather than that hit me in the chest kind of thing. So
the boomy bass.
It's boomy. It ain't good. So audible effective standing waves they could be no bass at one place, too much bass at another place, and then it could be resonant and hang for a long time when you happen to sit at a place where it's not nulled out. So solutions. The solutions are a 6-point strategy. This is my intro for what we're going to talk about next week, which is we're going to choose the right room dimensions for the room. And that you have to do with your architect, your designer, maybe modify your room if you're actually doing a remodel. Number one. Number two, we're going to implement some kind of bass damping to absorb some of the bass standing wave energy. We're going to choose the seat location so you're not at a place that has peaks or dips. Then next point is we're going to choose the subwoofer and speaker locations so that you actually counter those standing waves. I gave you the spoiler alert of like you try to put them at places where they contradict that seesaw kind of thing. Then we're going to choose the right crossover settings, which is to figure out how low you want to cross over your speaker so that you can take advantage of what you're doing with the subwoofers, but not get into problems with localization. And then in the end, we're going to tune all of this with EQ, time optimization, and all this other stuff. So those are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 points, 6 steps that once you get through that, you will end up with bass nirvana. You'll be happy with the bass. Everybody that sits in the room with you is going to go, "You are God. You have good bass. I love it. This is fantastic. I can feel my whole chest moving. My brain is shaking. I love it."
So you made an important point when you showed the bass, when you measured it at each speaker location. You basically showed the audience that your speakers are usually not in the ideal location to produce good bass at the listening area, which is why we want to divert that bass to subwoofers in the right locations.
Yeah, absolutely. So forever and a day, we got used to, with 2 speakers, to move them around until the sound was good. Well, it turns out with 2 speakers, you can actually affect some amount of the standing wave going left to right. And so you reduce some of that standing wave energy. There's still potentially a standing wave front to back. Well, if you can move the speakers away from the wall to close to the quarter point, you're going to put the speaker in a null. I'm going to show you that later. But if you put a speaker at the null of that seesaw, you can get rid of some of the front to back standing waves. So without knowing it, with just the old school or even current school world of 2-channel audio files moving speakers around until the sound is good. That's what you're doing. You're just changing the interaction between the drive units and the standing wave character of the room. And by having 2, you're a few steps ahead. However, once you get to multi-channel music or multi-channel movie, in which all the sound could come from one speaker, right? In most movies, the majority of the energy is coming from that center speaker, clear down to 40 hertz or 20 hertz, whatever. If you try to play that full range, you could end up with that absolutely horrible response of errors of 38 dB. Or if you have a scene in which the bass, there's a jet engine starting in the center speaker and it moves to the left. And in the center, by good luck, it didn't suck. But in the left, you have a dip of 38 dB. Your sound has gone from decent to like sucky.
I like this. I like this expression here. I never heard this before. Oh, wait, I did the wrong one. Hold on. Damn it. Where did it go? The treble thing. I don't get it. Oh, here it is.
I think I've heard that.
Without good bass, you'll be in a lot of treble. That's good. Good one, Ken.
That's excellent.
Good one.
Well played.
That's excellent. That's excellent. So we're going to talk about that. So the term bass management is actually something I coined when I was at THX. Let's just say 25 years ago. I forget. I was in a phone conversation with a reviewer who's since passed away, and we were talking about what we're going to do with the advent of Dolby Digital. And we're saying, well, one of the things we've got to do is manage the bass. So we have these special crossovers and all this other stuff that other people aren't doing to implement a management of the bass. We call it bass management. And bass management today has gone a lot further. It's not just about the crossover, but it's about where you put the subwoofers, how you optimize the interaction, all these 6 points I just talked about. And takes a while to get through it, which is why we need to extend this to another session next week.
So what I'll do is I'll create a new playlist for all about that bass or something like that. And this will be in there. It'll also contain other bass management related videos that we've done. I'll just have one location that you guys can go to. If you click on our playlist tab, you could see all the acoustic stuff in one playlist, all the bass stuff in another one. So it's just a great reference point. And again, don't forget about our Patreon at patreon.com/audioholics, because I'm going to take this slide presentation that Anthony is going over now. I'm going to put it there available for our patrons, so you can go over this stuff at your own leisure, and then you can come back and watch these videos and look at the slides and kind of correlate everything that we're talking about.
So 3 elements of good news. One element of good news is I'm actually going to paste the entire presentation, not just what I covered today. So if you're one of those engineering geeks that wants to read ahead of the professor, you can do that. You can actually go to the, sit together next week and go, I read through that. Cool. Now I'm understanding it. So that's one element of good news. Second element of good news is I got my second COVID shot today and I was fine. Some people have problems. I survived. No, not today. Yesterday. Sorry. I survived just fine. As you can see, I still have a lot of energy. Maybe some of the reasons for the energy is this 85% dark chocolate from.
Yeah, I can tell you got your shot because I'm tracking you right now.
Yeah, you are. You can see where I am.
Chewing on.
So I'll see you guys next week. And more about how to stay out of trouble with your good bass. I love that.
Yeah, stay out of trouble. I mean, this information that we're putting out. I mean, this is literally professional CDA level information that integrators have. I mean, this is invaluable, and I'm grateful, Anthony, sincerely.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah, we can't emphasize enough. I mean, I know everybody likes to go out and buy new equipment and get the newest amplifier, the newest speaker, or the newest magic cable. When at the end of the day, the setup and the room really plays a much bigger role than any upgrade you're going to do to your electronics or any your wiring or anything like that. That's why we're putting so much effort into this. And Anthony, I really appreciate you coming here on a weekly basis. Don, you're the integrator. You've done tons of rooms, so you're in the field. I like having people in the field talk about this stuff.
Everything that we do, the room acoustics come into play. Even I just was designing a system for a company to do live stream and meetings, and acoustics were important for the microphone and the sound quality in the room. It's paramount. So this is great stuff. People really need to realize, as Anthony did many years ago, how important this is.
Yep. Makes all the difference.
All right, guys. So we will be back next week, the same bat time, the same bat channel. We're going to be talking about bass. Anthony, once again, thank you. Don, great having you guys together. We missed you last week. I'm glad you're back.
Yeah.
Guys, don't forget about our Patreon channel at patreon.com/audioholics. And until next time, my friends, Keep listening.